Hi, everyone. I'm Marina from the Bedrock team. It's great to see everyone here. Thank you for joining. Super excited about our discussion today. I think it's going to be super productive. So these are the goals for today's discussion. We have about 5 hours together, and hopefully we'll achieve 4 things. First, I will give a quick introduction to the problem itself, where we're seeing the drop-offs, pain points. We'll learn about existing efforts. I'll do my best to cover everything that's going on in the retrieval incentives world. And then Jake will navigate us through the brainstorming, and hopefully we'll come out of the session today with the joint understanding what the highest priority items are for us to all work together in the next 6 months or so in the first half of next year. So let's start with a quick background. I'm sure all of the people in this room are familiar with the retrieval incentives world, but nevertheless, I just want to give a quick introduction so that we have the same kind of background. So when we think about successive retrievals, I would classify kind of like 2 big buckets where we can see some challenges. First is the reliability of retrievals, so the technical process of serving retrievals. And in that regard, we've done huge progress in the past couple of months. So first of all, the data transfer success has more than doubled in the past 3 months. So thank you to the Bedrock team and all the great effort they've done there. And we're continuing to work towards making sure it's even less than what we have right now. And particularly, there are some UX improvements needed for just gaining visibility into Lotus Node processes. But then there is the second bucket where we see challenges. And this is basically storage providers being willing to serve retrievals. What we see right now, and we'll dive into that a bit more in the next few slides, is that storage providers are either choose to not serve retrievals at all, or they are limiting the access to data. And this is where we want to focus today, so on the willingness of storage providers to serve retrievals. We have gathered some data in the past couple of months. So all of this data that we are looking at right now is from the auto retrieval bridge that Bedrock is maintaining. So let's go through what we're observing the funnel is right now. So out of the 100% of requests, we see that only, if you take out everything that's cached in the auto retrieval bridge, there is a first big drop off that we see from 203 to 12.5 million requests. This is the data that we can find with storage providers. This is kind of expected. But the area where we want to focus at is the drop off from the blue 12.5 to 475,000. So the first drop-off is basically the retrieval request, or any request at all, being unsuccessful. But then the interesting part is 1.77 to 474, where we see some errors with retrievals. And if you look at the breakdown of all errors, it turns out that more than 50% of these retrieval requests to public data through GraphSync protocol to IPFS nodes fail to some restrictions that are introduced by storage providers. So half of those are either, so they are rate limit retrieval requests. So basically, storage providers are saying we can only serve like 3 requests per day. And the other half, roughly, is the access control restrictions. So this is storage providers just usually through CID gravity tool, saying that we don't want to serve this content. So how do we solve this issue? First of all, let's try to understand why storage providers are exhibiting this behavior. And it's from the kind of current state of the world, it's pretty natural. First of all, There is no rewards for servant retrievals. Currently, you don't earn Filecoin or even, like, frankly speaking, reputational standing by servant retrievals because such systems don't exist yet. Nor you're being punished for not servant retrievals. There's no system for punishment yet. At the same time, obviously, retrievals come at a cost. There is operational cost of setting up the systems for retrievals. There is bandwidth that you need to allocate towards retrievals. Second, there's opportunity cost. You can use that same capacity to mine Filecoin through CC or storage deals. There's time and effort, both in setting things up, but also debugging, because there's still operational inefficiencies. And finally, there might be some legal liability if you accidentally or not knowingly serve data that's illegal, for example. So storage providers choose to just not do it. And so before we start diving into incentive structure, let's take a look at what data is on-chain right now. What data do we want to retrieve, potentially? So I've gathered, basically, or tried to estimate the best we can from the 258 petabytes of data stored on-chain. So first of all, in terms of who pays for data being stored, currently it's mostly a Fil Plus program. We see 4 petabytes that are legacy slingshot deals, but majority of data stored on-chain is sponsored by Network, so it's Fil Plus program. In terms of data privacy, this is a highly estimated number, so please don't quote me on that, but this is basically if you look at the amount of data being indexed, we see about 30% of data currently provided to the indexer. Maybe it's more, maybe there's some public data that's not being indexed right now. So there is at least 30%, we believe, of public data. And in terms of the sort of like programs, clients, again, there's not a ton of transparency by design, but what we can deduce from some of the programs being run is that about 18 petabytes out of 258 are slingshot data. There's 3.5 and another 2 programs, which is Discover and Evergreen. Aggregators, which are DAG House, Azure, only store about 1 petabyte of data. And the rest, 236, is this a bucket of different kinds of Fil Plus clients. It's both public and private data. There are research institutions and enterprises. So that's the best we can tell about data clients. With that in mind, let's put these clients or programs on a 2x2. So let's look at the latency requirement as well as how open the data is. So the yellow ovals are current use cases. You can see that they're mostly kind of like concentrated around cold storage. We have both publicly accessible and access control data. And publicly accessible, and cold is mostly all the data programs that we have. Slingshot. There are some public Fil Plus deals, such as Internet Archive. There are some aggregators that are also doing cold storage and store public data. And we also see the green kind of emerging use cases. They're very highly concentrated in this publicly accessible data that requires non-archival storage. It's the IPFS nodes that want to request and retrieve data from storage providers, is the emergent Saturn network, and there are compute nodes that will serve compute over data. And so this is the area that we want to focus today. So when we break into the workshop, start brainstorming, we want to talk about the publicly accessible non-archival storage incentive systems. In terms of the systems that we've spoken about, or maybe some teams have started working on, here's the lay of the land. As we can see, we don't assume that there will be one incentive system that fits all the use cases, and that's how it should be. So for example, for the access control data, we anticipate it's going to be, and continue to be, legal contract that incents the retrieval. So Search providers will serve retrievals because this is what they agreed with the client for the data that only they can access. In the publicly accessible data, in the archival world, we will also see legal contracts, but on top of that, there are some reputation systems that are emerging through mostly word of mouth right now. So clients would come to our team, ask team members about what search providers have been trustworthy and good to work with. There are some emerging set of dashboards that I'll show you later that also provide some visibility into what search providers are reliable and will serve retrievals. And also there's obviously enforced requirements. For example, Slingshot program requires that data is being served. The retrievals are successful. In terms of kind of this set and focus today, we've seen a lot of interesting ideas emerging of how to make retrievals attractive to search providers. Is reimbursement at the end of the month, for example. I think this is what Saturn Network is planning to do. Other ideas include clients pay per byte, so pay as you use, so to say. There's staking at deal time, which is more of an insurance system. Teams have spoken about prepaid coupons, where, for example, the user of the data is not the person who is interested in this data being retrieved, and so there's a separation in payment and usage of the data. So this is the initial set. Later today, we'll break into groups and brainstorm on more, but this is the area where we want to kind of ideate today. And very quickly, I want to give you an overview of what's going on right now in terms of retrieval incentives. I would categorize them in 3 different buckets. First is generating metrics themselves, getting some visibility into whether retrievals are even successful or not, and all the detailed characteristics of retrievals. Second bucket of efforts is surfacing these metrics to users in a way that's useful to them and to their goals. And finally, the systems that are aligning incentives between data clients, search providers, in a way that data is easily retrieved. So in the first bucket, the generating metrics bucket, there are 3 projects that were or are ongoing. The most prominent and interesting one is the validation bot. Currently, it's built just for the Slingshot program. As I mentioned before, Slingshot requires data to be retrieved, and so we want to be able to observe and enforce that rule. But the vision is to grow it further, so make the solution open source and open it up to more use cases than the Slingshot. Slingshot used to use DealBot, currently inactive, was semi-manual solution, didn't quite required a lot of manual effort from the team's perspective, but that was sort of a previous version of validation bot, so to say. And the data that we reviewed earlier is the auto-retrieval bridge data that Bedrock is collecting. These are IPFS gateway requests that we were able to find to be stored at storage providers. Azure also ran their own auto-retrieval bridge. Based on what I know, it's currently paused, but it also exists. So these are the systems that gather metrics. Now, there are a few dashboards that present these metrics, serve these metrics back to data clients. First one is a project called Filegram, developed by Filmine team. The interesting part about this dashboard is that it allows for clients to actually leave qualitative and quantitative reviews on storage providers. So for example, if I store data with a storage provider and I had great experience, I can rate them with a 5-star rating and write a quick review. We see some friction with the wallet authentication, not an easy UX. So currently, we don't see a ton of reviews, but the capability is there, and it's a very interesting idea in terms of developing this sort of reputation metric based on kind of like Yelp-like reviews. Retrieval metrics are not included, but once we have at scale kind of metrics collection, there's capability to include these metrics here. Another dashboard I'm sure a lot of people might have seen because it's one of the oldest, it's filerep.io. Unfortunately, we don't see, again, a high adoption because, partially because retrieval metrics are not included. Currently not actively supported, but again, there's capability. There's API capability, and there's capability to include more data points here. Finally, there is Starboard dashboard. Also, there is room for including retrieval metrics here. Currently, they're not being served. The work has been paused, but again, there's capability to plug in retrieval metrics here and make this dashboard a place where clients can go and learn about some of the retrieval details about this or that storage provider. And then finally, there are a lot of exciting projects in the incentive systems right now. I would categorize kind of mechanisms at either carrot or a stick, and try to do this distinction here. So the first one here is what we call SlingNet, a sort of a marriage between Storage Metrics DAO project and validation bot that I just covered earlier. And there are kind of two types of incentive mechanisms this project is exploring. First is a stick. If you don't serve retrievals, you're excluded from the data programs and you're excluded from the opportunity to earn Field Plus rewards within the Slingshot program. But there is kind of like more in planning, but the project that is hoping to set up a storage DAO around these metrics that would allow storage providers to earn DAO tokens, for example, for good retrieval behavior. And I hope Luca will cover that today, or Irene. Irene will cover. Oh, you're not going to cover. If you're interested, we can share more about this project. But this is basically, at the high level, rewarding storage providers for exhibiting good storage behavior, retrieval behavior. The next one that will be covered, I hope, is the retrieve.org. And this is more of a stick mechanism where provider of this insurance will get slashed if retrievals are not served. So you stake some amount of asset at the beginning, and then based on whether you serve or don't serve retrieval, you either are able to get it back or you're getting slashed. So there are two active deployments. I think Irene will cover that project a little later, so we can learn more about it. And finally, we do have one aggregator that is currently using a notion of reputation score to decide who the deals will go to, and that's FilSwan, developed by Charles's team. Again, more of a carrot. If you serve retrievals, you're rewarded by more deals in the future. And this is an active system that exists already. Jake will help us go through the phases today. I'll let him cover the plan.